Picture this. We're in the Middle Ages and the year is 1299. We follow two families as they join their households together. We follow John and his three sons. These are our main households. His oldest son is Jacob Alder. His second-born son is Jedediah Alder, triplets. They were Frederick, Connor, and Rowan. Sadly, John's wife Danielle passed away giving birth to the triplets, and they lost their daughter Rowan in birth. So when we join the family, we meet a child, Connor and Frederick. So when looking for marriage contracts for his son, John, instead of looking for wealth, looked for women who came from strong childbirthing families. So he wanted to make sure he didn't set his sons up for heartache. He met our other founding Sim Gen Zero, Abraham Gilmore. Abraham Gilmore was married to Kathleen Gilbert, and they had 4 children: Halia Gilmore, Tamara Gilmore, Pascal Gilmore, and Cormac. Abraham lost his wife Kathleen due to heart conditions one spring, and then 2 years later, he lost his son Cormac to freezing. Abraham Gilmore is a poor fisherman with 2 oldest born daughters, so he was very excited when John wanted to make this contract deal, as even though they're all in the peasant class, John's family was a bit better off than Abraham and his family. Abraham promised the hand of his 2 daughters to John's 2 sons. John's oldest son Jacob is promised to Halia. John's second-born son Jedediah is promised to Tamara Gilmore. We meet the family in the first episode, 1299, and get to know a little bit about their background and how to play the challenge per my extreme added rules that I'm calling random acts of life. And that is the end of the first episode, 1299. So next we're going to enter the year 1300. The episodes that feature year 1300 are an arrangement, and an heir and a spare. Part 1 of 1300 is in an arrangement. I introduce you guys to the hidden sword in the stone that I had built on the property deep in the woods. Our sword in the stone is a remnant of the majestic times of King Arthur, Merlin, and his round table in the early medieval ages, dating back 300 to 400 years before the events of this challenge. The major events that happen in an arrangement: Jacob and Halia get married, as well as Jedediah and Tamara get married in a double wedding at the local chapel. Jedediah and Tamara move out in a home that John had provided with some of the money that he got from the deal with the Baron. The pregnancies and births and deaths of this episode is John Alder. He dies at the age of 35 from being struck by lightning. We also lose Frederick Alder at the age of 13. He died from a rabid animal injury infection. Halia gets pregnant with her first child, and Tamara gets pregnant with her first child. The sisters are so excited to begin their new life, married to their new husband. The second part of the year 1300 is called heir and a spare. Our major events are when Connor ages up and he meets his potential wife, Ellen, who is a servant in the royal household. She's a servant in the royal household and a nanny for the queen's children. She's very fond of the queen's children, and the queen is very fond of her because the queen has lost a few children, and Ellen has been vital in helping her get through that and raise her existing children. Connor marries Ellen at the very end of 1300, and Connor and Ellen are staying on the main Alder household property. So we now have our 3 households we are following. The year 1301 arrives. Part 1 of 1301 is in an heir and a spare. The major events that happen in this episode is I introduce you guys to the royal family and the Gothic family household, who's a major noble household. During this episode, Tamara gives birth to her first son and our first child, Riker Alder. In the second part of 1301, we find the episode Grim Around Every Corner. What happens in the episode of Grim Around Every Corner, I find out that Halia has also given birth whenever I went to Tamara's household. And Halia gives birth to our main household's first heir, and they automatically name him Frederick. That was Jacob's brother who died in the prior episode. So I definitely like to think that the game played homage to that character that we lost too soon. Luckily, Riker and Frederick both age up to infant. Ellen gets pregnant with her first pregnancy with Connor, and they're very excited. Tamara also gets pregnant with her second pregnancy, which ends sadly in a miscarriage. She goes to the local spellcaster's house for help because she went into premature labor in the middle of the night. The spellcaster who helped her is Emma Brewer. This is important to note later. The child she lost was a son, and they named him Michael. This death caused Tamara a lot of pain as she really struggled with being pregnant, and she struggles with her journey in motherhood. Jedediah keeps pressuring Tamara to have more children, as he was raised by his father to have sons and a legacy to live on. Jedediah has always wanted 3 sons, and he continues to pressure Tamara even though she hasn't healed from this loss. The family rallies behind Jedediah and Tamara after their loss and do their best to support them in their time of need. We notice during this family dinner that Jedediah flirts with Ellen. This goes unnoticed. But as I know now, it is important to actually acknowledge that this happened. We find out Jedediah isn't really good at farming or anything else. He does odd jobs and doesn't really have a job. So the family is struggling. The second older household family is struggling. Tamara funds their household and all their needs through her seamstress skills, making clothes. Right now, she's only making basic necessities like shawls, scarves, hats, and socks, and undergarments. And at the end of 1301, Tamara gets pregnant for the third time after being pressured by Jedediah. At the very end of 1301, we enter the episode I Am Screaming. This episode, the game is loud, but I am louder at least, so you can hear me a lot better. I literally am screaming in this episode at one point, so just beware. It's pretty dramatic for me. Major events that happen is that the prince makes his round around the kingdom, getting to know everyone in the local households and to rile up spirits before the archery competition. He also checks in on Ellen as she was his nanny. The family preps for the archery competition, and that's the end of 1301. The year is 1302, and the episodes that featured the year 1302 is I Am Screaming and Royal Wedding. We start 1302 off getting ready in the main older household for market day. On the way to the market, Halia unfortunately experiences what seems to be a miscarriage due to pregnancy complications. As she heads to the local midwife, we do learn that it was an ectopic pregnancy and that she was pregnant with 2 twin daughters. Jacob and Halia named their twin daughters that they lost, Alice and Evelyn. Later on in this episode, Ellen gives birth to 2 twins. They named them Ashton and Christine, and both the children survive birth, but Ashton is really close to a death number. Unfortunately, Ellen passes away during childbirth due to hemorrhaging. The family, shortly after this loss, attend the archery competition. The archery competition takes place in the wintertime to lift the spirits up of all the people and to remind them that the king is there for them and to support their needs and to celebrate their kingdom. Jacob wins the archery competition, which is a blessing to their family. Jacob has an audience with the king where the king learns about him being a farmer and tells him if they have a very successful spring crop to please bring and set up a stall in the castle courtyard to help bring exposure to his small farm and hopefully get contracts with other local lords and ladies for produce. During the archery competition, the queen also learns about Ellen's passing away. The queen was very fond of Ellen as she was the nanny and midwife to her. The queen asked Jedediah to tell his brother Connor to bring the children that he had with Ellen to the castle because the queen would like to meet with them and make sure they're okay and not in need of anything. We learned that Jedediah and Tamara do not have the best relationship and they are really struggling. In this episode, Halia falls pregnant again with her third pregnancy. Tamara gives birth to a daughter they named Gemma. She has an impossible time bonding with her due to the sadness she carries since losing her prior pregnancy, and we learn that Tamara sees Gemma as an unwanted child because she knows Jedediah wanted 3 sons. The second half of the year 1302 occurs in the episode called Royal Wedding. During this episode, we experience the winter solstice with the main older household, and they have a great winter solstice. The family has money that they could pour back into their property and expand their house. Riker and Frederick from the main and second older household both age up into toddlers. Ellen's ghost stays up with us and takes care of the house when everybody is asleep. Connor and Ellen's children, Ashton and Christine, both age up to infants, but Ashton again rolls a number very close to the death number, just like he did on birth. In the second older household, Gemma ages up to an infant. Tamara is unfortunately in a mean streak, and she is trying her hardest as a mother, but her match with Jedediah isn't ideal. She is constantly pregnant, parenting, and taking care of the crops, chickens, and also providing the money for the family. The royal wedding also happens in this episode. Princess Eleanor marries Lord Roderick Gothic, who is a spellcaster and a descendant of Merlin. We learn that the king is only a 3rd generation of his line and that his grandfather was a minor lord who led a rebellion against the bad king who was also a Gothic. Not the Gothic family who is left in the kingdom, but they were the cousins of them. We also learn about the king's intention to marry all his spare children off to the remaining Gothic heirs so they are integrated into the new royal line. His hope is not to give the people any ideas of putting a Gothic family back on the throne and for them to see the Lionheart family and the Gothic line as one family. The king has also encouraged his daughter to prevent the male Gothic heir any children. He is encouraging his children to do this to prevent all pregnancy with the Gothic line spouses to forever eliminate the Gothic line without using any force of violence, thus keeping the good King Lionheart's legacy clean and clear. King Richard Lionheart does listen to his people. He supports his kingdom, and the people are thriving under his rule. He does worry about future generations, though, as his heir and son, Prince James, is often absent and seen as uninterested in his own inheritance. In this episode, Tamara gets pregnant for the 4th time, and Halia also gets pregnant for the 3rd time. The episodes that feature the year 1303 are It's Getting Sad and A Spring Equinox, which is a promise of new life. Major events that happen in the episode It's Getting Sad. Halia's brother Pascal finally ages up, and her father shortly after passes away from old age, which is an amazing thing because in this time period, not many people died from old age. We're heading near the end of winter, and Connor has finally decided to pack up his twins, Ashton and Christine, and head to the castle and to meet with the queen. Jedediah also accompanies him to help with the children. We notice the ghost of Ellen has always been coming around to help take care of baby Christine, and she even nurses her. Tamara is trying very hard to bond with her daughter Gemma, even though it's extremely hard for her as she is still struggling with her loss of her son and the fact that she is also pregnant again. Tamara is always mopey, gloomy, hormonal, and stressed out due to the burden of taking care of the family on her own and doing everything. Connor and Jedediah later on make it to the castle safely, and the queen asks them to join the royal family servant household. During this time, Connor accepts, and he also gets an apprenticeship to underneath the king's master carpenter. Jedediah is also trying to woo the king during this time with his lute skills, and the king is being very polite. We also see in this episode that Halia is a naturally gifted painter, and she decides to paint a portrait of the queen to give her whenever they go to market day. Tamara finally gives birth to another child, and it is a second daughter, and they name her Morgan. After this birth, Tamara and Jedediah decide to sit down and talk about taking a break for 1 year on having children. Jedediah agrees, but he states that he still wants to have more children. During this break, Tamara starts to get to work on her career and really focus on growing as a seamstress. Halia, her sister, makes her dyes and yarn to support her. During the second half of winter, Halia is having a really hard time with her pregnancy. Halia gives birth to twins. One is a boy and one is a girl. They name them Anthony and Christian. Unfortunately, the daughter Christian does not survive birth. The second part of the year 1303 is in a spring equinox and a promise of new life. During this episode, we see that Connor is adjusting well and extremely happy and excited to raise his kids in the castle. Connor's kids, Ashton and Christine, age up. Ashton, again, gets a number very close to the death roll. Gemma ages up to a toddler in this episode. Later on in the episode, in our main older household, Jacob and Halia experience the loss of yet another child when newborn Anthony passes away on the first day of spring. He passes away from a heart defect that he's had since birth. We now enter the year 1304. And the episodes that feature the year 1304 are A Spring Equinox and the Promise of New Life, as well as the episode A Bard, Twins, and a Harvest. 1304, A Spring Equinox, and the Promise of New Life. Ellen's ghost realizes that Connor and the children are gone, and she is completely devastated. Ellen's ghost has also been watching over Jacob and Halia's lost children, and she is often seen by their gravestone. In our main older household, Jacob begins to train his heir and only son, Frederick, in the care of animals, and Frederick is showing a real love for animals. As we know, Halia grew up as the son of a fisherman, and she notices minerals in the water and in the rocks near the river on the land. During this episode, the family finally gathers at the main older household for the spring equinox. During the spring equinox, the family gathers and rallies around each other and supports each other. We learn that Halia is again pregnant for the 4th time, and Tamara and Jedediah agree to finally start trying to have children again so they can continue for more sons. Tamara is also growing very successful as a seamstress. The second half of 1304 occurs in the episode A Bard, Twins, and a Harvest. In this episode, we start in our second older household. We find that Jedediah is constantly playing with his kids, reading them poetry, but doesn't do much out. We also see that Jedediah goes out every single night to play at local taverns and to sing. He isn't very great as a bard though, and his skills levels are very basic. And what makes matters worse is after he plays, all the little bit of money he makes, he drinks it and parties it away before coming home. His favorite tavern to go to is the one where all the knights like to frequent. Jedediah is always dreaming of romance and adventure. During this time, Pascal also meets his future wife, Amy. While out with the guys, Jacob stops by the local chapel and prays to the Watcher for the safety of his wife in the new birth, as well as all the health of his children. Later on, Jedediah stops by our main older household and talks to Halia and Jacob about buying Tamara a loom, as her business is really growing. Pregnancies, births, and deaths in this episode include Tamara getting pregnant for the 5th time, and Halia finally giving birth successfully to 2 twin boys, Francis and Caesar, and they all survive the birth, including Halia, and age up to infancy. Going into the year 1305, we spend a year in our main older household. The episode is called A Deal with the King for the Better of Our Land. The main older household receives gifts from Connor to celebrate the birth of the twins. Connor is doing very great as a carpenter underneath the master carpenter in the castle. We also talk briefly for a moment about the sword and the stone on the property, as it will become important to their family. Jedediah finally saved enough money to buy Tamara a loom, and Tamara's business is really booming. Pascal finally gets married to Amy, and she is actually above his class, so she is marrying down in station. Jedediah is really struggling with unfulfilled dreams, and he tries to pour himself into his children, but he is still feeling extremely unfulfilled. Jedediah is really struggling seeing Tamara be successful and being the main breadwinner of the family. In the main Alder household, Jacob and Halia and their firstborn son Frederick travel to the castle with their spring harvest. Jacob finds out that the other farms in the kingdom have been struggling with their crops' yield, and Halia gives the queen the painting. The king greets and welcomes Jacob to the castle market stalls anytime he wishes to join on future market days. Halia also talks to the queen about the citizens' concerns. We also overhear that the king and queen are staying in separate apartments due to an internal rift in their marriage. Connor shows Jacob how well he and the kids are doing in the castle. Christine and Ashton have grown close to the royal prince, Augustine. They also are getting a basic education in the castle. I will make a note here that I have been calling Prince Augustine for every single episode except for the episode he is named. So I've changed Prince Augustine's name to Prince Augustine because that's what I call him 99% of the time. So just so you guys are aware, it's the second-born prince. Jacob and Halia get to stay in a spare room on the servant quarters of the castle. It really inspires our main family to work hard and grow their legacy and due to the ambiance of the environment, they try for a baby in the castle. During this episode, Tamara excitedly gives birth to a son. They name him Lancelot, and Lancelot also makes it to infancy safely. Halia gets pregnant on the summer solstice while they were at the castle market day, but her pregnancy unfortunately ends up in another miscarriage and they lose another son who they named Abraham after Halia's past father. During this time, Ellen goes to the beyond and watches over their child the moment she loses it. It's a very touching and sad moment. Moving on to the year 1306. The episode that features 1306 is called Given a Contract. In our main Alder household, Jacob and Halia's twins, Francis and Caesar, age up to toddlers. Halia's brother Pascal has been learning the blacksmithing trade due to his wife's connection. When Pascal comes to visit, Halia talks to Pascal about the minerals she has noticed on the land. Pascal investigates and he tells the family that the minerals are valuable resources that they can mine. Jacob asks Pascal to investigate it. Jacob is excited and asks Pascal to investigate it further. Jacob also asks Pascal to train his future children on how to use the resources to benefit the family. Unfortunately, Ellen's spirit is beginning to fade away, and during this time, Connor is finally ready to open his heart up to love again. Connor finishes his training as a carpenter and is given a contract from the king to remodel the old abbey. The kids get to stay in the castle and continue their basic education as Connor is commissioned for this contract. Connor also subcontracts a lot of lower class working people on this project to pour the wealth back into the kingdom. The king is praised for this project and the way it's being handled. Prince Augustine has a huge crush on Christine. We overhear a conversation between the king and the queen about how happy they are that Princess Eleanor has been married to Lord Roderick for all these years and still hasn't had a child. The king is very thrilled that his daughter is listening to him. The queen also says that it's time for Prince James to settle down and meet his wife soon and start working on their next generation of heirs. In our second Alder household, I realized that I had messed up the chart and Morgan was an infant for way too long and was due to be a toddler and almost ready to age up into a child. So I fixed her aging on the chart and we correct that and make her a toddler. Also in our second Alder household, Gemma and Riker are having problems. Gemma notices that her parents favor Riker as a favorite and Gemma is acting out a lot more. As well as in the same household, Lancelot ages up to a toddler. During one night when Halia was over visiting, Gemma catches on fire due to both Tamara and Jedediah's negligence. Jedediah really begins to blame Tamara for what happened, and this causes even more drama in their already fragile marriage. Jacob, Halia, Jedediah, and Tamara all age up successfully to young adults. Jedediah and Tamara both try to pour themselves into being better parents. Tamara focuses on learning to try to accept her daughters and help them grow into strong women, and Jedediah keeps being a fun dad, playing with his kids and telling them stories of adventures and historical legends. And that's the end of the year 1306. There are two episodes that feature the year 1307. Broken Vow Part 1 and Broken Vows Part 2. The first half of 1307 and Broken Vow Part 1, Riker and Frederick finally age up to children, and we have our first 2 children in our household. In our second household, Jedediah gets the personality trait changed to paranoid due to everything he's been going through. His heir and son Riker also has a passion for singing and playing the lute and has been reading to his younger siblings. Tamara is working on getting over the loss of her pregnancy and really doing the work to heal her relationship with Gemma. Tamara also has the personality trait change to family oriented, and she asks Jedediah to please start helping out more financially and to be more attentive to their needs. They have a deep rift, but put a band-aid on their troubles and try to be together yet again. Jedediah, Connor, Jacob, and Pascal all go to the Godwin-owned tavern. Connor is on the mainland to talk to his brothers and his friend Pascal about how well the contract is going, as well as a new lady he's been interested in. Jedediah spends the night talking to the guys, bashing Tamara and venting about his problems. Tells them how he can't wait for his children to be grown so he can just go off on adventures. That night he decides to cut loose more and look for more adventure on his own. When he's deep in his cup, he woos the spellcaster Emma Brewer and flirts with her in front of everyone. Once the guys tell him it's inappropriate and most of them go home, Jedediah gets a room at the tavern and spends the night with Emma. Connor is the only one there and he knows about it. We check in with Connor at the Abbey after this and see all the work he's been up to, and it looks great. Connor also ages up to a young adult and we meet the woman who's caught his eye. Her name is Ophelia. Later on in that year, after courting Ophelia, he also proposed. Connor has deep issues with Jedediah after he saw his brother cheat on his wife. As Connor lost his first wife, Ellen, after 1 year of marriage, the fact that Jedediah could just so blatantly take advantage of Tamara and her trust really makes Connor upset, as he is disappointed in his older brother for not appreciating what he has. The second half of the year 1307 is to end the episode Broken Vows Part 2. This episode starts with a short intro that updates the situation with Princess Eleanor and Lord Roderick. It explains how they've been married for 5 years and have never had a child or a pregnancy. I explained to you guys in the intro why she has not had any children with Lord Roderick, but she is warming up to him as she is starting to fall in love. I revealed to you guys in this episode that the king has told his daughter how not to give him a son. This is important to the king because he sees this as the only way to ensure the Lionheart line has no threats to the throne, and ensures her own twin brother's line of succession in the most humane and peaceful way the king sees possible. Princess Eleanor and Lord Roderick have been falling in love, and they do end up trying for a baby, and she succeeds in getting pregnant. Jedediah comes back home after his events at the tavern, and Tamara is so excited to see him. She also tells him that she is pregnant, and he is extremely upset by this news. Later on, when Tamara is visiting our main older household, Jacob, our heir, tells Tamara about Jedediah talking bad about her at the tavern, at that point which he left. Prior to the autumn equinox, the whole family, except for Jedediah, gets an invitation to Connor's wedding at the Abbey. Connor has a beautiful wedding to Ophelia, and everybody's excited to see Connor in love and moving on and so successful. After the ceremonies, Connor tells Tamara about Jedediah cheating on her with Emma Brewer. Tamara starts to devise a plan to work on divorcing Jedediah. Later on in the year, we go to the royal family, where Prince James finally meets his wife that he's been married to since birth. His wife is Princess Josephine from the Kingdom Moria. They have their official wedding and officially consummate their marriage. Later on in the year, Ophelia gets pregnant with Connor's child. Going into the year 1308, in the episode Runaway, Jedediah and Tamara are no longer living together. They move. Tamara is taking care of all the children on her own while pregnant, and Jedediah moves into the local tavern. Tamara is officially on her own, starting her business and focusing on her family. Pascal and Amy are finally expecting their first child. In our main household, Halia and Jacob talk about having more children, and they agree to try again, but Halia is very scared as she has had struggles with miscarriages in the past. Connor's children, Christine and Ashton, age up, but again, Ashton gets a number that's really close to the death number. Ashton ages up with the mean trait, and we decide it's because Prince James and Prince Augustine have been treating him poorly. Tamara finally repairs her relationship with Gemma, and the two are finally close. Gemma also ages up to a child successfully. At this point, everyone in the peasantry class knows about Emma Brewer giving birth to Cadian, who is Jedediah's bastard child, and being raised by Father Brewer, who is Emma's husband. In our second older household, Tamara and Jedediah's daughter Gemma dreams of learning how to use a sword and a bow. Their daughter Morgan also ages up to a child. So right now our second older household has 3 children, Riker, Gemma, and Morgan. And then they have a toddler, baby Lancelot, and another child on the way. Pascal and Jacob come up with a plan to make sure Tamara and the kids are taken care of. Tamara gives birth to a new baby girl and struggles. Her and the children decide to name the baby Nimue. In this episode, Halia also gets pregnant, and Ophelia gives birth to Connor's son, and they name him Eric, and they all survive. During this time, in our main Alder household, our heir Frederick is preparing for the archery tournament. Halia gets really close to the Watcher and her spirituality after dealing with all her pregnancy loss. In the distance, we notice that Lady Giara Gothic is running away due to something that Prince Augustine does. Frederick meets Tiara, and she is an incognito pretending to be lower than her station and tells him her name is Tiana. They form a fast friendship and a cute childhood crush. We also see that later on in this year, Ophelia is pregnant again. Halia finally gives birth, and it's twins again, and she successfully gives birth to one boy and one girl. They name the babies Arthur and Gwendolyn, and everybody survives, and they have their first living daughter. We finally enter the year 1309 in the episode called A Flame. I'm really proud of this episode. It was a labor of love, and I'm really happy that a lot of you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't seen any of my other episodes and you're just watching this recap to see what happened in the years 1299 to 1310, I recommend going back and watching the year 1309 and possibly year 1310, as they're my favorites so far. I realize I've been saying bastard this whole time, and I probably should have been saying illegitimate, as that's kind of like way more appropriate, so I'm going to backtrack that. In the beginning of this episode, we check in with Cadian Castor, who is the illegitimate son of Jedediah. Father Brewer is raising Cadian under his roof, and in church, since he is the pastor, he is shaming cheating and infidelity through his sermon. This has greatly affected the Godwin Tavern due to him pointing fingers at the establishment as an unholy place to participate in any activities. We also check in on the Gothic household. Tiara ventures home and tells her father, Lord Mortimer Gothic, about everything except for the little boy she's got a crush on. During this time, the Gothic household also learns that they are officially grandparents, a granddaughter born from Princess Eleanor and Lord Roderick Gothic. During this time, Lord Gothic talks to his younger children about their heritage and their bloodline, dating back to Merlin himself. He explains to them that it's important that they keep their line alive, and in the kingdom, he tells them if they don't do this, that dark creatures will return, and it is very important that there is always a descendant of Merlin on the shores of Avalon, which is the name of our kingdom. King Richard Lionheart is not excited to hear that his daughter has given a child to Lord Roderick, but he is relieved to know that it is just a daughter, as he does not value them as much as he values male heirs. Lord Mortimer Gothic is excited either way because he is happy that the line is continuing, and he does not see femininity as a weakness. We check in on Lord Roderick Gothic and Eleanor. During this time, Eleanor confesses to Lord Roderick that she is not meant to give him children due to her father's wishes. Lord Roderick tells Eleanor some of the magical family secrets and how important it is that the Gothic household continues. We check in on the royal family, and King Richard is talking to his two sons, Jacob and Augustine, about his family, about their line, and his expectations. Prince James proves to be arrogant to his father and a very absentee prince who's extremely entitled. King Richard really wants to be sure that James knows his line is not safe until the Gothic line is completely gone. Later on, they spar, and James shows his father that he thinks he is ready for the throne. His wife, Princess Josephine, also announces to King and the Queen that she is pregnant and swears that she is only having sons, as she has been told that by healers and midwives. King Richard takes a moment to tell James about the legend of King Arthur and his prophesied reincarnation. We check in on the main village, where we see Jedediah and Calvin arguing in front of the tavern about how Jedediah is ruining the Godwin Tavern's business and how Jedediah has a huge debt to them. Later on this year, we realize that Father Brewer has actually grown attached to Cadian, even though it's not his son. He's decided to patch things up with Emma, even though he feels shamed by her actions, and had he not been the leader of the local church, probably would have divorced Emma, as he was completely embarrassed and ashamed by her actions. Later on in this episode, Gwen and Arthur also age up. We see that the ghost of Ellen haunting our main household is rageful because she found out about Connor moving on. Later on in the year 1309, we go to the archery contest on the winter solstice. We have a junior section where Riker, Gemma, and Frederick are all competing. Frederick is the best one of all the kids. Prince James is sitting with his father to show him that he is ready for more responsibility, and they are observing the competition together. Jacob, Connor, and other people from the kingdom all participate, and no one from the main household wins this year. At the archery competition, we learned that Frederick was really excited to see his friend, who he believes name is Tiana, and he is looking around asking about her whereabouts and describing her her because he really is just so smitten with her. We also see Princess Eleanor is pregnant again and arguing with her father about him not supporting her choices and her family, but the king is trying to direct her to talk about this in a more private place. Also, Calvin Godwin, the owner of the tavern, is here at the archery competition, and he notices Tamara and he complains about Jedediah to her. We find that Prince James is actually arguing with young Frederick, and he is being absolutely dastardly to him, where Jacob and the queen actually have to intervene and see what's going on. Frederick then speaks to the queen saying he was just looking for his friend, and as he describes her, the queen is saying, like, I don't know anyone of that name or that description, but if I see her, I'll let you know. And the family gets ready to leave when Frederick does finally see Lady Tiara, and he's like, Tiana, I'm so excited to see you. And the queen is like, oh, hello, Lady Tiara. And both Jacob and Frederick are like, Lady Tiara, Gothic? Like, what do you mean? And they learn that she is from the Gothic household, and they are kind of intimidated because she was at their house. And the queen decides to store this information to use as blackmail one day, possibly to the Gothic house line. We also see that the king has taken the prince around back of the archery tournament to argue with him about his behavior in front of the whole kingdom. In the background of the archery contest on the winter solstice, we see Lord Monomer freaking out. Originally, I thought it was because of his daughter embarrassing him with a peasantry class, but we do know that Lord Monomer Gothic is very accepting of all people and also not judgmental. So we find out later that it has sinister meanings as to why he is petrified and terrified and not acting like himself. After the main family has a winter solstice, we peek into the tavern and see a paranoid Jedediah writing some stuff down on a scroll and leaving the tavern. And then we go to the main castle where we find out the princess has given birth to 2 children, but unfortunately, they're both daughters. And Prince James is furious as his wife is not keeping her promise that she kept going on and on about the last 9 months that she was pregnant with a son and he was going to have an heir. And now he has 2 daughters, and he is absolutely disgusted by her and devastated and angry and kind of throwing a temper tantrum. She's just very excited that she survived birth and she has her healthy children. We finish the episode 1309 Aflame by entering our second altar household. We check in on Tamara as she is aging up Nimue into a toddler. Unfortunately, her son Riker has come home from the archery tournament and winter solstice, so she moves his bed into her room to keep an eye on him because he is struggling to breathe. Tamara also intended to spend the next day traveling to the castle because she has finally saved enough money to petition for divorce. So she tucks in early for the night and she asks her daughters Gemma and Morgan to keep younger brother Lancelot, entertained while she goes to bed early and keeps her ears out for Nimue and Riker. During this time, there's a winter storm outside, and Jedediah is peeking through the window. He has been outside for a couple of hours and notices that only Morgan, Gemma, and Lancelot are up in the house, so he goes on in. When he goes in, he kind of looks at the loom, puts his hands on it, and then he talks to his children. He says, hey guys, like, I'm heading out. I'm going on an adventure, but I miss you guys so much. And I really want you guys to come with me if you want to. Where's your brother? I really want to make sure Riker comes. And they're all really excited. And they're like, hey, you've never met our new little sister, Nimue. We named her Nimue because we love the story of King Arthur that you tell us. And he's late. They've named their child Lancelot. And then their cousin's name is Arthur. So they were like, we named her Nimue for you, Dad. And Morgan and Gemma are just so excited to see their dad. And Lancelot, he was 2 when his dad left, and now he's 4 or 5. So he's very excited to see his dad. And, they all are super excited. And he's telling them, like, let's go on an adventure together. And they're not really thinking about their mom because their mom has never been the fun one to them. And they just are happy to have their dad back. So in the middle of the night, they all leave with their dad. And he takes them to the tree line near the river because Pascal, Tamara's brother, has a boat across the way. And he actually steals the boat to get away. So Jedediah's plan is to steal Pascal's boat and to leave the kingdom in the middle of the winter. But before he leaves, after he gets his kids to the tree line, Jedediah decides to go back for a few supplies. He steals all of Tamara's money, takes some food, and on his way out, he fumbles with a loom, very angry, trying to break it, and it ends up catching fire as it is near their fireplace, and he kind of looks at it, pushes it down and leaves it, and then runs to the trees, takes the children on a boat, and disappears, and leaves the kingdom. In the haste of his escape, he really didn't think about the results of his actions. It was the middle of the night, and Tamara smelled smoke. She heard a rippling roar, and she's screaming out for her kids. She goes over to check her son Riker, who's struggling to breathe and who is coughing, and she looks over into the corner of her room and sees her little toddler Nimue, her last born daughter Nimue, in the corner crying about how it's hurting her eyes. The smoke is hurting her eyes, and she's crying and wailing. In this moment, Tamara has a split second to think, and she realizes that something is wrong and she has to get her children out of there. She is so attached to her son Riker. It's their heir. It's her firstborn. But, due to the possibility of him not being able to survive, Tamara has to make the hard choice, and she chooses to pick up her daughter Nimue, who is healthy, and take her out of the house. Tamara runs out of the house with Nimue and tries to turn back in time to get Riker, but by that time, pillars have fallen in the house, and Riker passes away from the fire in his sleep. And Tamara is absolutely devastated because her house is burned down. She cannot find her other children, and her son is dead. And this is she doesn't know how this happened, but she is absolutely and completely devastated. And that's where we end the year 1309. And the last year of our decade is 1310. We have 2 episodes that feature 1310, A Great Curse, and The Ides of March. We start off 1310 very upset about what happened in the year 1309 and what Jedediah did recklessly to his family. I take us to the Abbey, and we check in on Connor and see that he has had another son, who I mistake for a daughter at first because of the name, but they have had, Ophelia and Connor have had another son successfully, who they name Elijah, and all their children, both his sons, Eric and Elijah with Ophelia, age up to their next lifespan. And Christine and Ashton come back to the Abbey to see their father in the wintertime, as it's just better for the castle to send back the younger servant to their families. Ashton and Christine have a bitter grudge towards each other, and that is because Ashton is really mean because of the way that Prince Augustine treats him, but Prince Augustine favors his sister Christine, as he has a huge crush on her, and Ashton often teases Christine, saying, you're nothing like me, you're a servant like me, he's never going to be with you. So the siblings definitely have a hard time with each other, and those are Connor and Ellen's kids. Connor also is done with his contract in the Abbey, and in the springtime will be moving out in the year 1311. So we kind of check in and we see what our third household has been up to, and they are all doing great. So we also learn that Emma and Father Brewer have repaired their marriage, and they are now expecting another child, seeing that Father Brewer has forgiven her and accepted Cadian as his own son, even though he is not. We also see Amy and Pascal's daughter Yvonne, and we are so excited because they really seem to struggle to start their family. So it was really nice to see that they did have a successful child. Right after this, we peek into the castle to find that Prince James is arguing with Prince Josephine about her not being able to deliver him a son. He is disgusted by her because he is just not attracted to her, and he is very angry with the fact that she so confidently was walking around saying that she was having sons. So he tells her, you answer to me, you're going to have a son or I'm going to trade you in. So he does not value his wife at all, which is not a good thing because she comes from a very influential kingdom, and even though our kingdom is not new, our monarchy is new, so he is not making allies. After we check in on the main royal family, we peep in on Princess Eleanor and Lord Roderick Gothic. Lord Roderick is in his study working on magic, while Princess Eleanor is reading downstairs. They now have given birth to a baby son, and so their son and their daughter are upstairs in the nursery when a mysterious woman who appears otherworldly enters the room and is enchanting the children, kissing them, singing to them in another language. Princess Eleanor hears some noises coming from the nursery, so she goes to check in on the children and finds this woman standing above her daughter casting spells. Princess Eleanor confronts this stranger, and the stranger shouts in another language, raises her arm, casts a spell, and disappears. Princess Eleanor is honestly shocked and startled by this whole situation, so she runs downstairs to tell her husband, Lord Roderick, about it. Roderick is not sure who she is, but Eleanor said, "Look, I don't feel safe. I want to take our children to your family's house because it is safer there for us." And Roderick agrees in a few days that he will take her. As we are leaving, we notice that Lord Roderick's sister, Lady Tiara, is outside. So he goes outside, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and he checks in on his sister, says, what's wrong? And she tells her brother that there has been something wrong with their father since the archery competition and the winter solstice, and she doesn't know what's wrong with him, but there's something wrong. And shortly after that, the mysterious lady appears again outside and is casting spells. For unknown reasons, Lord Roderick rapidly ages from 18 years old to an 80-year-old man and becomes decrepit. Tiara is physically upset to see her brother age right before her eyes and is hysterically screaming, while Eleanor is upstairs, her children upstairs in the nursery, freaking out and gathering things as she hears Lady Tiara downstairs screaming. The mysterious woman comes in and challenges Lord Roderick to a magical duel. Magical duels are binding, and once you are challenged, you cannot get out of it. So Lord Roderick has to perform in the magical duel. Unfortunately, this proves to be fatal to him as he passes away after only a few moments during the duel. The lady is then confronted by Tiara as she is telling her that she is going to get revenge for her brother, and then the mysterious woman says, "Don't worry, I'll be back for you soon," in the entire Gothic line, and she yet again disappears in front of everybody's eyes. Princess Eleanor comes downstairs to find out that her husband has been vanquished as he speaks to her from the grave, telling her to get the children to his father's house as soon as possible. Eleanor falls on her knees crying, agreeing to do what he says. And that's how we end the episode of Great Curse, and we move on to the last part of the year 1310 in the Ides of March. In the beginning of Ides of March, we catch up with Jedediah, who has escaped the kingdom with his 3 children, Gemma, Morgan, and Lancelot. They are staying in a campground outside of a tiny village, and they don't know where they are, and it took them several months to get to their location. We see that he is actually struggling yet again to provide for his family, but now he really has no other choice because his children's survival depends on it. Morgan and Gemma really don't understand the reality of the situation, although Morgan is starting to miss her mother. Gemma is very excited for adventure because her dad promised her that he was going to teach her how to shoot the bow and arrow, and this is something she's always wanted to do. Lancelot is very excited to be outside of the kingdom as well, as he thought he would never see it. So since Jedediah had burned down the house, Pascal has taken Tamara and Nimue in. Pascal often comes by our main household to collect supplies as Jacob and Halia financially help support Tamara, as well as provide food and items that the family can use. In this episode, our children age up and everyone is very happy. We spend a lot of time nurturing our needs and getting to know our main household even further. While Pascal was on his way from his house to the main house, he did come across a cow, and since he really doesn't have the space for it, he gives it to Jacob and Halia for all the help they had been providing for Tamar. Gwendolyn and Arthur both age up to toddlers, and they are so adorable. The family spends a great winter season hanging out inside, really bonding and playing with each other. Frederick has done a great job as a big brother and often dotes on his younger siblings, teaching them skills and playing with them. We check back in on Princess Eleanor, and she has finally made it to the Gothic household. She tells Lord Mortimer about the situation, and he realizes that he assures her that her and the children are safe in his house as it is protected by a magical barrier. He explains to Tiara the reason he has not been okay since the winter solstice is that he somehow was interfered with while doing the protection spell for the entire kingdom. A long time ago, Merlin put a spell on the kingdom to protect the kingdom from dark forces, and someone from his bloodline has to renew that barrier every single year on the winter solstice. And unfortunately, somehow someone knew about it and interfered with Mortimer's spell while he was doing with the barrier while Mortimer was trying to reinforce it, and the spell backfired on him and caused him to lose his mind for a few days. After listening to his daughter and Princess Eleanor talk more about the mysterious woman, he realizes that she is from the Vladimir line, which is an ancient line of evil spellcasters and dark creatures. Although he's not sure, it sounds like she is one of them. She's an extremely dangerous woman, and Lord Mortimer is honestly worried about what's going on. Princess Eleanor is convinced that her father, King Richard, is responsible for all this and all this heartache, but Lord Mortimer Gothic ensures her there is no way he can know about it, as this is something that really only spellcasters would know, and he is planning on launching an investigation with all the kingdom's spellcasters, and Tiara, his daughter Tiara, volunteers to join him on his exploration and his investigation. Mortimer also assigns his son Laurent to study the spell and to hone his magic, as someone always needs to be powerful enough to do the spell to protect the barrier. And with Roderick now gone, it is Laurent's responsibility and Tiara's responsibility to step up and take those roles. Since Tiara is helping her dad, Lord Mortimer, on the investigation, Laurent will be staying home to study and protect the household from any invaders. After leaving the Gothic household, we peek in back at Tamara and Jedediah's house. We see the ruins and we see Tamara outside on the road arguing with Calvin Godwin. Calvin thinks that Tamara had burned the house down on purpose, but Tamara is like, my son is dead. I did not know that Jedediah left the country and left the deed to the property to you. She's telling him she had no idea of his scheming, and Calvin is telling her, well, I did overhear him saying that he was going going to say goodbye to the kids before he left. So maybe he is responsible. And, Calvin is trying to settle debts and he is harassing Tamara saying like, you owe me this money. And she's like, you're not getting anything from me. I don't owe you anything. This is not my problem. That's between you and Jedediah. I was petitioning him to get a divorce. Like I am not the one to mess with. Essentially, she is like not handling it. She is not taking any, she's not accepting anything Calvin is throwing at her. And during this exchange, a rare type of magic happens, and Calvin and Tamara realize that they are soulmates. Something clicked, and they had the magical spark, which is extremely rare in the world, and they had realized that they were actually soulmates, two halves of one soul, which was honestly iconic and hilarious to find out because that was not planned or scripted. I have a mod that allows for soulmates, and not every sim ends up being a soulmate with their partner. So it's very interesting when they do find one out in the world. And unfortunately, for the drama of this, or maybe for the good of it, Calvin realizes that Tamara is his soulmate. Now, we do have the issues of Tamara still being married to Jedediah, and Calvin is also married with children. So I'm not sure how we're going to move forward with this. But once they realized they were soulmates and had that spark, they instantly dissipated in their argument and decided to settle things differently. And they were like going to touch bases later because Tamara is like, you're not getting any financial gain from me due to Jedediah and his foolishness. He gave you the land. Keep the land. It's yours. I'm not trying to get it from you. She's washing her hands of the situation. So that's where we leave them, and she heads over to Pascal's, and we learn that she is trying to get her business back on the ground, but without a loom, she is moving a little bit slower, but her clients are very patient and understanding. So hopefully it'll only take a year for her to kind of get back on her feet and make a new life for her in Nimue. But after talking to Calvin, Tamara is confused, but also hopeful that Jedediah has her children, as they have been missing and nobody has heard anything from them since. Ending the year 1310, we go back to our main household and we see Jacob and Halia taking care of life as normal. During the springtime, it is Francis and Caesar's birthday to age up into a child. With the luck of the roll, Francis does get to age up into a child, but unfortunately his twin brother Caesar does not. Hence why I named the episodes the Ides of March. If you know anything about history, the Ides of March is the day that Caesar died in real history, so I named the episode the Ides of March as a nod to us losing Caesar. This was a very sad loss, as Caesar had been really close to his mother the entire episode, and it was just so beautiful. Halia actually ended up getting pregnant. I did mention that. I did forget to mention that before. So Halia is actually pregnant, and she loses her son, Caesar, who she has gotten really close to, especially over the last year or two. And it's kind of like her buddy. Like in the house, he's always helping his mommy out. So it was really hard seeing him gone and losing him. And due to this loss, Halia goes into premature labor and gives birth to two children. They are both twins and they both survive their birth, but we do not know if they make it into infancy. They name their two sons Edard and Davos, and Halia has to get through this hard time in her life and still take care of her living children. So that is where we end the decade with Jacob and Halia, our main older household. Jacob is really stepping up as a father, and even though during this time period, gender roles were very much the norm, Jacob has broken a lot of those bounds and crossed into taking care and nurturing his children, and more than the typical ways back then. So he really stepped up. And in our main household, Halia and Jacob are just so in love. So to see him step up and be the best partner is really all we could ask for during all this heartache. The family is walking into 1311, kind of in a state of the unknown. We have some looming darkness, but a venture awaits for some of our children on foreign land. And Halia and Jacob have a lot riding on them, as their family has now reached 6 living children. And over the decade, we realized that they have also lost 6 children. So it was a very intense thing to realize that half of our main household's children did not make it. A lot is going on in our kingdom, and I look forward to playing the next 10 years and seeing what happens as it gets extreme really fast, which is why this is my version of the Ultimate Decades Challenge. In my next video, you will hear me talk about how I adjust the rules to fit my more fantasy style gameplay. As you can tell, I play a little less historic and a little bit more fantasy, so my rules are going to change to affect that, but don't worry, it's not going to make it easier. It's just going to make it more extreme and more personal to my style gameplay. I hope you guys enjoy my storytelling and know that I spent a lot of time on this outline. It really was a labor of love, and I actually had half of this done and I lost some of my footage, so I had to redo it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this summary and it was worth the wait. It actually is very difficult to read events that happen while you were playing it because I find myself stumbling all the time. So I'm up for the challenge though, and my next one I promise will be more exciting. And yeah, the editing and everything only gets better with time. So thank you guys for sticking with me and enjoying everything along the way. And I'll see you in 1311 in hopefully a few days because I am ready to play, guys. Like, I want to get back in the medieval times now. All right, bye guys.